Hi, this is the fellow passenger. This is the first video in a series of 6. Over a 6-week period, I will make an attempt to make a complete album, and I would like to take you with me on that journey. I would like to use the following process for this project. Week 1 will be making a plan, which is this video you're listening to right now. Week 2 will be sound design. Week 3 will be composition. Week 4 will be arranging. And week 5 will be mixing and mastering. And week 6 will be packaging. Before I go into the bits that we will be talking about in this video, I would like to give you a little bit of context about this project. The weekly videos that I will be posting are quite likely to be excerpts from this process, picking out the interesting bits, because quite frankly, I think there's going to be a lot of repetition and perhaps parts that are not going to be that interesting to see over a long period of time. So I'll pick out the best bits. And also during this process, if there are elements that I think would be interesting to share with you, then I will do so on my Patreon page. And that could be things like samples. There will probably be stems from the tracks, and I will also be sharing the Ableton project files. However, I would like to point out that compared to my other videos where I try to stick to just the Ableton stock plugins or free downloadable stuff, I'm going to use both third-party plugins but also some hardware, which may restrict users from opening the Ableton project files and use them. But I'm still going to put them up there if they are of any use to you. However, that shouldn't stop you from using any of the samples and stems and things, and hopefully you could make some versions of my music as well. And there will probably also be a lot of material that's not going to end up on the final album that you might find useful. During this process, please don't hesitate to ask me questions and highlight things that you would like to know more about. That really helps me to understand what you're interested in. So we're going to jump into week 1, which is this very witty video, and we're going to talk about 3 things. It will be the structure, which I have sort of highlighted a little bit already, what we will be doing each week. I will also talk about the ambitions for this project, as well as what I would like the concept for the album to be. So let's start talk about the structure. I've divided this up into 6 weeks, 6 sessions. It's not going to be a full-time week on each of those steps, but I will attempt to package up the tasks that I know I will need to complete to finish the album. So that's why I have split it up in that way. And I may not be 100% totally strict with this structure that I have set out, but I do know for a fact that if I have some form of structure, that helps me focus. It is a plan, and especially for those moments when I'm not quite sure what to do next, it just takes some of that thinking out of it, and that makes it a little bit easier for me. I've made several videos where I've attempted to complete an entire track in 60 minutes, and that is a really good exercise. But there is only so much I can do in an hour, and finishing an album is a little bit more involved, and therefore I'm putting this together because I actually want to practice that too, not just finishing music. Now I'm taking it one step up. The structure I've chosen is not the final silver bullet solution, but I feel fairly certain that I will have something at the end of it. Something that is more or less complete. Warts and all, probably, and there's always going to be things I would like to change, but there you are. I think that's just the nature of it. This structure may look different for you, and it may well look different for me as well the next time I embark on a project like this. But I hope you will find this journey inspiring and help you come up with your own method that works for you. And I would love to hear what you might come up with, or if you find this useful at all, actually. So that was the first bit about structure. Let's go on to ambition. Not something strict to go by, but it just helps me focus. So I've set up a bullet point list with the title, "The album should feature." I have picked at least 6 complete tracks. It should feature some hardware instruments and effects. This will definitely include some modular and what I consider sleeper gear. When we get to that episode, which is actually next episode, I will talk a bit more about what I mean by sleeper gear. I would like the tracks to work both on their own and as part of the whole album suite. So it's not just a collection of tracks bundled together, that they create something more when you listen to them as a whole. I would like it to feature at least a tempo change, at least one scale or key transition, and at least one non-4/4 time signature. Those 3 last ones are things that I tend to forget about, but I would like to practice them more because I think they're interesting tools for creating tension and release. I understand, especially with tempo change, it's not ideal if you're planning to make music that someone is going to DJ with. I think there are ways around that. Obviously, the particular points where someone would mix your track in, you can make sure that you don't have lots of tempo changes during those, and out as well, that you don't have a lot of tempo changes there. But also, I think of the music that I'm making, I'm not thinking of that being on a dance floor, so it may be less of a problem. I definitely want to explore that more as a tool for tension and release. When I thought about this list of ambitions, you can see that all the statements I have, they are very specific. And I've done that so it's easy to tick them off the list because it's very measurable. Have I made 6 tracks or not? Do I have a tempo change or not? It's something that you either have or don't have. That's how I liked to define them. Because if I would say something like, I want this album to be better than my last one, that's going to be impossible to say if I actually achieve that or not. So these are very measurable targets. If I ever get to a point where I feel that these ambitions are holding me up from making this album better than it should be within, I don't know, given parameters, I'm just going to let myself change things, but I will try to use this as a bit of a guidance and a scaffold. And again, if I have any doubts of what I should be doing next, I can look at this list and see, have I tried any of these things yet? And then I can dive into them. And especially I find that good if I have a day where I feel less inspired, then I at least got a starting point of something to dig around. So that was the ambitions list. And now the third and last point for this week's video is the concept. I think that music is about creating feelings. These are not necessarily feelings that you have to label in one way or another. You just, I suppose, you know when you feel something. That type of inspiration can come from all sorts of sources, such as books or images or just the environment that I'm in. And one thing that I am doing to collect inspiration is Pinterest boards. I save all sorts of things to my Pinterest boards. If I see something that somehow evokes some form of feeling that is interesting, I don't think any further. I'll just save it. I don't necessarily reflect on what type of feeling it is, or I don't analyze it anyway. I just save it for future use. Here is a little glimpse of the fellow passenger board that I've created. I am not very strict and literal when I'm referencing my inspiration here. I don't want it to be too literal necessarily. It's just about like creating a little bit of a vibe in my head, which helps when I start putting music together. May sound really pretentious, but as long as it helps me, that's good enough. And I don't really, well, this video is an exception, but otherwise when I work like this, the intention is not to share the references with the listener. It's just a tool that works for me, okay? And I've noticed a common thread here in my work in general and what inspires me, and that is when I see something or hear something that it's sort of hinting at having more depth, something that you don't necessarily quite see what that is, that there is some depth and structure to it, but the image or whatever it is doesn't necessarily give all the evidence away, not even given the evidence that there is more to it. There may not be, who knows? And that triggers my brain to seek meaning. And I think things rarely exceed the imagination. So if my music can trigger that type of brain activity, you starting feeling, imagining things, even though they're really abstract, then I'm very happy. It's hard to explain, but I think a lot of the images on my Pinterest board evoke this kind of brain reaction for me. While looking through these images, I also notice a lot of them featuring patterns, sometimes patterns within patterns, and that relates nicely to music, I think. So you have a bar loop that fits in a 4-bar that fits within a 16-bar, and it's almost zooming out of a fractal or zooming in, or depending on how you want to look at it. The other thing that is interesting thinking about an album, which fits in with that thing with hinting at the bigger story, is to have some form of narrative arc. If you're thinking about the classic 3-act structure, which is really common in storytelling, it looks something like this. Act 1, the setup. Act 2, the confrontation. Act 3, resolution. So I'm going to make a really lousy attempt of translating the original Star Wars film to this. In Act 1, you see sort of Luke Skywalker living on the farm with his aunt and uncle, and then you get the plot point when they are killed and he decides to go into space and find the princess. And then in the second act, the confrontation, you have a really big build-up in tension, which ends up being, Obi-Wan Kenobi gets killed and Princess Leia's planet gets destroyed, and you get to the crisis point in Act 3, which is basically they're going to go blow up the rebel base, and it all ends up with them going and blowing up the Death Star instead, saving the rebels, and then it sort of tails off and they go home to celebrate or something. I like the idea of this motion of tension and release that you get in this. I don't necessarily going to adopt this very structure, but just thinking about it like that. And I know that's something that is being used in music as well, not exactly the structure, but an album where you even the track itself has got moments of tension and release in there, but you look at it at an album level as well, that the different tracks provide different types of moods, and you're taken on this journey, and it helps the listener to stay interested in what's going on. Anyway, you see on this Pinterest board, there's also a lot of images that don't quite fit what we have just described, and that the reason for that is basically they spark some sort of feeling. That's why they ended up on this Pinterest board. And they may become useful for another project, but probably not this one. So what I'm going to do, I will set up a clear board, move over a bunch of the images that I think fit this nice description of hinting at depth and meaning, patterns within patterns, and also something that helps me think of the story arc. And I'll put that board together, and then I will share it in the description of this video so you can check it out if you want to. I'm not going to use this as strict references. It's something that I just want to be able to bring up and look at. And again, those moments when I am not sure what to do or don't feel inspired, I can just get in the right frame of mind by just looking at that board. Or I hope that's how it's going to work anyway. I think that's about it for now. I hope you will come along on this journey. There will be other videos too during this period. I'm not going to dedicate the next 6 weeks to just doing this. So no worries if this stuff is not for you, but some of the other stuff that I do is. So don't forget to like and subscribe and all that gubbins. And if you're able to, please consider sponsoring my channel. That is really helpful. All those links will be in the description. In next week's episode, I will be sharing a bit about my sound design process, which will feature hardware stuff, maybe some software stuff, and also why I have chosen to do this next. See you again soon. This is your fellow passenger. Bye.